All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I did let you know we'll still be staying on concerns around the education sector. Now, the future of educational development in Nigeria holds both challenges and opportunities with a rapidly growing population and a changing global landscape. It's important that we'll begin to stay on all the concerns that will, bring about us being able to compete and being able to relate on a global level in terms of our educational standards. We're looking at creating the right environment for better learning, and we have none other. Always a pleasure having her come join us. Dr. Aderonke Kujore, yes, joins us all the way from the US. She is the founder Aderonke Foundation. Nice having you come join us again on the show, Doctor.
It is always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we want to say a very big thank you also to you for making our time. We know the time difference right now. You should be snoring in bed at this time of the day, but you choose to be awake to talk to us on the show. We sincerely appreciate your commitment to us on this program. Thank you very much, Dr. Ronke. Okay, so quickly, let's dive into the concerns. What would you say is an ideal learning environment, Dr. Ronke?
Sure. I think, first of all, especially when we think about the younger children, pre-tertiary education, it's making sure, first of all, that we have an accessible institution, or we have accessible institution for our children. So schools that are in walking distance, especially for those who are unable to afford transportation. Schools that have teachers that are educated and prepared to teach. Schools that have the right learning resources within the classrooms, everything from, obviously, in a digital age and computer technology to books, to writing materials. Sometimes we don't think about all of those details, but all of those details are important. Schools that have furniture. In Nigeria, it's not something that you can overlook now, because not all our schools have those. Schools that are that have the right structures. We have so many issues when you think about a conducive learning environment in Nigeria. So it's all of it. It's everything from the structures of our schools, the buildings, the accessibility, the materials, the educators being prepared and qualified to do the teaching, and so much more.
You know, when I was listening to, as I was listening to you, it just came to my mind the fact that all the challenges you just mentioned cuts across all strata of our educational learning system, from the primary, secondary, even the tertiary institutions are also being faced with all the concerns that you have raised so far. But for so many, it is a fact that we have moved some steps better than where we were before. I don't know if you want to agree with that. Do you see us having taken some steps forward as against our steps backwards?
I actually sadly will disagree with you on that one. I think most people, when you talk to them about, the state of education in Nigeria, one comment that often comes out is this idea of, the former years. We look at a lot of people that we have in leadership today, whether it's governors or, even from a presidential perspective, they talk about what education was like in their times. They talk about how the government really supported them. They talk about, regardless of, your parents' financial status, being able to go to decent schools and get a decent education that have set them up for where they are today. So unfortunately, I need to disagree that it doesn't look like we're getting better. It looks like we're getting worse. And what is sad is that the rest of the world is getting better, but we are regressing. And that in itself is a leadership issue, making sure that we as leaders of the country are able to set up the right environment for our children to be educated and properly educated.
In recent times, we have seen some attempts by this administration, attempt at, bettering the lot of the system. We have seen the sign of the student loan bill into law, and we did hear that some students are beginning to cash into that initiative of government. Many would say that is a step in the right direction. However, I don't know if you feel different about that, but then there are many other concerns which I know you want to stay on, because you rather would deal with this from the foundation, and the foundation should be the primary education going forward before we begin to look at the secondary and the tertiary institutions. So how well have we done with the primary institution, primary level of education?
I think if we were to grade ourselves, we'd be at a woeful F at this point, because what we have is abysmal. It's abysmal and it's shameful, and it's very shameful because our children are not in school, and those that are in school are getting, the majority. Let's talk about the majority. We do have some private schools that are doing excellently well, and that's unfortunately where the most wealthy in our environment are sending their children to. But if you exclude that 1%, and look at the majority of our children, the almost 100 or so million children that we have, they don't have the right facilities. They don't have, access to schools. We still talk about 20 or so million out of school children. We still talk about the fact that roughly around 7% of our, I think it's 15 to 24-year-olds have any technical skills. My team is in the field every day, and we find thousands of children that have never seen or touched a computer. So we're not in good shape at all when you think about what makes a decent education in today's digital environment. But we're focusing on other things, sadly.
Okay, so since we're discussing the primary education partly, the onus falls on the local government, because that is their constituency. They should ensure that children are in schools within the primary level. Do you also think that the latest signing of the autonomy for local government could be good fortune for the primary education within the local government areas?
I think it could be. I think when the autonomy is local, hopefully we'll be able to get more of the attention locally. Parents would be able to question their local leaders. They can walk up to their local government offices and demand what they require from an education perspective. We can step away from the blame game, talking about we don't have the funds. We have not received the funds from the state or things like that. When it's local, I think hopefully there will be more accountability. But with that also needs to be awareness. Being one that has spent a lot of time in many local governments across Nigeria, oftentimes you find that we don't even have the right leadership at the local government level. Sometimes you find people that don't have education qualifications or don't have, just the qualifications to be leading education in local governments at the helm of things. I recently visited a local government, I wouldn't mention names, and it was clear that the staff doesn't come into the office. All the desks were dusty. You could tell that they just, were trying to show off because I was in there for a quick meeting. And so I think putting that autonomy at the local government will help, but I think we also need to make sure that we're educating our citizenry of what their rights are and what they need to be demanding, and we're making sure that the qualified people are in the offices that make the decisions for education at the local government level.
All right, Doctor, it's always a pleasure having you on this program, particularly when you look at the level of commitment you put into talking about education and trying to improve a lot in this country. But I'm just curious, I want to know, you are in diaspora, and when you come across Nigerian students abroad and how they respond to education there, I mean, we've heard so much results. I mean, we've heard so much reports about how so person has excelled in this course of study and all of that. That when you look at that happening in other countries with Nigerian students, how soon do you think we can replicate that here back home and keep most of our students back here in Nigeria rather than having them go to other countries abroad? How quickly can you see us turning these fortunes around?
It's an interesting question because, like you said, we do excel. Our children do excel once we leave Nigeria, and not just our children. We all do excel when we leave Nigeria. So what is clear is that it is the environment within Nigeria that sort of restricts some of the possibilities that we have. How soon? I actually don't believe that it is that difficult to change the tide here in Nigeria. If there is the willingness from those who have the resources. I'll give you a case study, for instance. Imagine if all our presidents, all our past presidents that are living, took a decent portion of their financial resources and devoted it to education within each of the 6 geopolitical zones. It would be a stark difference if they thought it was important enough to focus on it. Imagine if each of our governors, most of our governors are wealthy people, imagine if each of our governors decided that they wanted to ensure that all of the children within their states had technology skills, basic technology skills. It can happen within a year. But what it takes is that interest and that determination, and that's what we don't have. I think we're still more focused on the politics of it all, on looking good internationally and forgetting that there's work that needs to be done locally. I think if our leaders, if those who had the resources, I think, we boast of some of the richest people across Africa and across the world. If each of those people determined in their mind that they were going to change the state of things within their local environments, whether it's their state or their cities, all of that can change within a year, within a couple years, and our people will actually see the difference. The problem is it's not our priority yet.
But Dr. Aderonke, some people strongly believe that with the level of out-of-school children we have in the country, and not just in the north, but then spread in other parts of the country as well, don't you think it's more or less deliberate from a certain class of people to keep others uneducated in this country? Because when the elections come around, for instance, and you see how this mammoth number of young people are, engaged to participate in certain activities around the elections, you begin to wonder. So some people believe that this is a bit deliberate. I don't know if you share that opinion as well.
It's hard to say. It's hard for me to say that it's deliberate, right? Because then you're judging the mind of a man, and some of us don't have the power to do that. But I think it is. It's around what their interests are, right? If I have no interest in the education of my people, it only takes for me to ignore it, right? So I don't know that it's an intentional don't educate these people, but ignoring it is enough to cause the havoc that we have today. So I think for many people it's ignoring, and for many people it's not understanding the time bomb that is ticking when our children are not educated. For many people, it's just having other priorities. When a man wakes up in the morning and his priority is getting that next seat at the National Assembly or getting a contract from the government, that's where he spends his time, as opposed to the education. So I think it's a priorities matter. I wouldn't necessarily say that it is, it is a deliberate effort to, suppress people, but more so priorities. And they have bigger priorities, which is usually politics and making money and stashing money, as opposed to betterment of the country as a whole.
All right. One last question for me, Doctor. Let's look at, David earlier on has touched a bit on the question, talking about the student loan fund and all of that. But then I'm going to ask you this on a scale of 1 to 10. I know the current administration has been in office for just a little over a year, but how would you rate, this administration? I know they've not been in office for so much longer time, but then how would you rate them so far? Speaking about their commitment to education.
Sure. It's a tough one because I've been following a lot of their work. I would probably give them a 5. And I'll tell you why. I'll give them a 5 because we can clearly see that since the start of their tenure, they have been making education decisions. They've been putting people at the helm. They've been launching education programs. They've been launching youth programs. I think where they fail at this point, and why I wouldn't rate them higher at this point, is that the proof is in the pudding. They've been talking a lot. They've been putting out policies. They've been putting out direction. They've been putting out ideas. But we really need to see better in implementation. A year in office we should by this point have been able to see some tangible execution of their plans. We also make the mistake of, I think I saw something in the news recently that, a certain number of out-of-school children were back in school, and that came from the Office of the Minister of Education. Unfortunately, it's difficult to build trust and to communicate your progress without data behind it. We can't just have news articles telling us that you've done something without us seeing the actual proof that you've done it. So I think they fail with implementation, but I'll give them a little credit for a lot of the new initiatives and new ideas that they're putting on the table. Hopefully they'll change the tide and prove us wrong, that they're doing much better when we start seeing progress.
Dr. Roque, let me write on that question quickly, maybe the very last question for the show. How else would you have wanted the federal government to run with all of these initiatives that they seem to be pulling out there?
Sure. No, very good question. I think it's a couple things. First of all, you have to clarify the state of the nation, right? It has to be clear where we are, your starting point. And so they should have done some work to at least ensure that everyone is clear on where we are, the number of out-of-school children out there, the state of tertiary education. Set the grounds right in terms of where we are. Secondly, you develop a plan. Obviously, you come up with your ideas, you develop a plan, and you communicate the details of those plans. This is what we intend to do. This is how we will do it. And these are our mile markers, right? So the entire country should know that by June or by July, here are the 5 things that we are expecting to see in our local areas from the federal government. If it's not going to happen in your local government, and it's first of all happening in Abuja or in Kano State first, our entire country should understand that based on the plan that the government has put out, here's when and where I will start seeing the changes within my area. And then when the changes are actually implemented, then you come back and communicate to the world, to the nation, that this is what we have done, and here's how you can see it in your area. That's the only way that you build trust. You say what you're going to do, you do what you said you were going to do, and then you report on it. Until they have all of those ticks, it's almost a waste of time, because people wouldn't believe them even if they're doing it. And honestly, you can put anything in the news these days. We have to see the proof in the pudding.
Well, very well said, Dr. Aderonke Kujore. Timelines are very, very key in people getting to trust your policy direction. Give timelines. Thank you very much for your time with us on the show, Dr. Aderonke Kujore, who is the founder of Aderonke Foundation. Always a pleasure having you come talk to us on the News Hub. Thank you so very much one more time.
Thank you both.
You can now retire to a lovely bedtime. Well, Anduna, we have to run right now. A final word from you in 60 seconds, Anduna.
Oh well, David, it's been a wonderful show, and I particularly love the fact that we've spent time talking on education. I just hope that the right authorities hear these things and make an effort to work on it. Particularly when she gave the Bola administration 5%, a 5 out of 10. I hope the same can be said of state governments as well, because they also have a crucial role to play in improving the lot of education in Nigeria.
from the primary school level, which is domiciled in the state. It's important that state governments become a lot more intentional in ensuring that the primary school environment is a lot more conducive. Thank you, Anjona. Thank you so very much. And that's our show, everyone. Thank you all for staying with us, all our listeners, all our watchers, all our guests on the show, and all that attempted to call on the show. We want to say a very big thank you. The show